The Women Beyond the Table is a community of empowered women who are rewriting the rules and taking their skills, knowledge, and wisdom beyond the table.
Welcome to the Women Beyond the Table podcast. My name is Tammy, and I'm so happy to be here today with my co-host, Caryn. Caryn's the best. Hey, Caryn, how are you?
Hey, Tammy. I'm so happy to be here with you too, especially about this most exciting guest we have today, Meg King, who is otherwise known as the Queen of Five-Star Success Strategies, and to talk about leadership. I'm thrilled.
And you know what? We were talking about this, Caryn and I, because we're so stoked. I mean, we love doing these table talk episodes. And this topic, leadership and the win-win, it's a big one. It's on everybody's mind. Like, how do we do the win-win? Especially for me, after reading Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I realized I wanted to shift my whole mindset from a lose-win philosophy, which I practiced my whole life, to the win-win. So Meg, as the Queen of Five-Star Success Strategies, I mean, you work with business leaders, teams, and entrepreneurs to help them gain clarity in the leadership processes, develop great communication practices, and learn techniques to navigate chaos and confusion. And that probably applies not just in the workplace, but in your personal life too. So in short, you're the creator of the win-win, which we're all really excited about. So let's dive right into it. Meg, what do you think makes a great leader?
I love it. Well, first of all, I want to thank you both for inviting me onto this amazing platform. I love Women Beyond the Table. I love everything that you stand for, and everybody that's in that program and all the work that they do. It's truly just amazing. So, what a great question. What makes a great leader? And there can be so many answers to that. But what I really feel makes a great leader is a leader who's in tune to their own emotions, who's in tune to their vision, who's committed to that vision, but actually implementing it and sharing it with their emotions to others on their team, to others that they do business with, that they're really being guided through a level of vulnerability, because vulnerability is really important in leadership. But now I don't mean vulnerability like, oh, sobbing vulnerability, right? I mean vulnerability of like, hey, I'm struggling here and I need support. You know, really asking and sharing and then guiding. Like, a leader is not somebody to say, hey, you go do it. Right. A leader's side by side.
And right, Meg. And it's interesting how when leaders are in the trenches with their people and I want to say exhibit the qualities of really getting in the dirt, the people around them on their teams feel more inclined to get down in the dirt with them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Well, it builds trust. Yeah. When somebody's sitting and working side by side with you, and you acknowledge that they are in that management position, but they're willing to be available and I love the being vulnerable, because in the past, I mean, it was always like, there wasn't that people, connection. The boss sat here, they sat in the office, and there was like a wall. And I think that's been one of the big changes that has come about in recent years for leaders. Maybe it's just a new culture or mindset towards leadership, that they are opening up more. They are more people driven than in the past, where it was just about bottom line, maximizing numbers, dollars, you do your job, you're out kind of thing, and right. I think that's a big difference. But, there's leaders in all walks of life. I mean, it's not just the business leader, right. There's leaders in a lot of places that you least expected, and heroes that are coming out. So do you think that somebody's born that way, or do you feel it's something that you learn how to be?
That's a good question too. I do want to say, I just want to address, because I love what you said, that there's a shift, and that used to be the boss. The triangle has been flipped around. so that the team and others are on the top and the leader is actually more closer to the bottom because they're
Wow.
really supporting. They're the support. And when I think about leadership with others, when people are born, are there born leaders? Are there born people who are born with that natural confidence, that natural charisma? Absolutely, there's people who are born with it. But leadership can actually be cultivated as well. If we're nurturing that leadership ability, if we see something special inside of somebody or somebody's strength, everybody has a different strength. Everybody has different weaknesses. But inside of a family, even if we took it down to the vision of a family, and we're looking at different children within that family and their strengths, how do we cultivate that strength to be a leader? My granddaughter is a little entrepreneur at the ripe age of 7. She calls me, Mama, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm selling friendship bracelets. Do you want one? Like it's just a natural thing. That
I love it. She want to join the group?
Right.
I think she should. She's an entrepreneur. It's important, very important. Got to hit that younger generation.
When I think about her, she just takes that leadership. That's just her. But some of her friends might be a little bit held back, more reserved, but it doesn't mean that they're not leaders. They just might be.
They haven't cultivated that muscle yet, or that learned behavior of how to lead. And I also love what you said about vulnerability, because when a leader is able to know their own weaknesses, whether it's emotionally or otherwise, they're able to delegate. And when a leader is able to say, hey, I'm not good at this, I'm good at this, but I know who's good at that, and that, doesn't that help to recognize that?
Yes. Well, listen, we can't all do it, everything, right? I'm in the process of writing a book, and my book is Your Cape Has Holes in It, and all the gifts that those holes have given. So as leaders, we wear cape. Women, I think have capes a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know. I have a
multi-caped,
picture of
I would say.
myself with my cape.
I love that title, by the way.
Thank you. So, but here's the thing about that. We have to ask for support, and we do have to delegate, because we cannot do it all. Try as we might, as a mother, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, whoever you are inside of that leadership role, we cannot do it all. And I work with my clients closely about understanding what can they do, what are they best at, and what can they delegate. So here's what I look at for leadership. You're either going to do it, you're going to delegate it, or you're going to ditch it. So where do we put those into that category? When we're trying to balance and juggle all of the balls or spin all of the plates.
Yeah, I think delegation is a really important thing, because one of the things I learned, because as entrepreneurs, especially when you're starting out a business or you're trying to build it, the budget's there and you're worried about everything and you're trying to do everything. But the truth of the matter is like, what you can learn, it takes you 3 weeks to figure out, somebody's really passionate about it, and it could take them 2 hours to do it, and they're excited to do it. So you know what? What's the value on people's time and on your time? But I find that one of the ways a leader might fall a little bit short is in their communication skills. When you have somebody you're delegating to, it's so important to really be clear about what the expectation is, if they need the training, additional training to do it. I'm learning all of this. If, what the timeline is, what the expectations are, because they can't be successful if you're not giving them enough information, and if you're not there to be available and monitor the feedback and monitor the progress, and give them, as a leader, give them helpful, feedback, and be available if they need counseling, and be there. Because you see sometimes, and I've noticed, I've done it, like you delegate something, you walk away from it, and then you don't even know what's going on, and then it doesn't get done right, and then there's an issue, and you don't want issues. That's the last thing you want as a leader, is any kind of issues. So yeah, I think it's amazing. And I also think, going back to your granddaughter, who's showing this remarkable entrepreneurship, streak in her. Being raised, and when you're in a family, there are families that support that, and there are families that don't support that kind of personality of, going out there. I remember my two older sons were like, entrepreneurial, and I was always like going out with them and buying them and whatever they needed to sell, because I got a kick out of it. Whereas so another parent might not have, and some, like you never know. And they wound up going to Babson, which is like all entrepreneurial. It's an entrepreneurship program, and they're doing well. They're standing on their feet. But it's just really interesting, because I always was like, what if I said, you know what? I don't want you doing this, or I don't want you selling these things in school, and I don't want you selling this stuff at camp, but it depends. And I'm glad to hear that your granddaughter is able to be that woman, that young woman who's out there building a business and doing her thing, and that not only her grandmother supports her, but her family does, because it's not always the case,
No.
It's being nurtured, which is what I think you're talking about, Tammy, is when you nurture the natural talent in children, that's wonderful. And the other children, if they have a desire, it could be cultivated, which is amazing to know too, that you can learn that.
Well, to what you were saying too about the support, it's interesting. I just had a conversation last night. I was a guest on another podcast, and I had an interesting conversation about family ties to leadership and really cultivating it from there. And it does stem, there is the support of having that family, of that mother or that father who's there to say yes, but also those parents that are driven by fear. Like, what has those parents not really support that entrepreneurship or that leadership within their child? It's really recognizing the fear that they're in and the fear that they have and the story that operates back here. So leaders, whether we're born as a leader or whether we have to cultivate it, we actually have to address those stories all the way around. Because the journey that we're on as a leader, and when we're working with teams and we're communicating, the stories from our childhood, the stories of what happened come to surface. They come up all the time. And I support my clients with that, in recognizing their fear of delegation, because that's a big one. A lot of leaders are afraid to delegate. Their fear of rejection, their fear of vulnerability, what that might mean. So those are all, it's very interesting how it all ties actually back into our family. I call them family tags.
Mm-hmm. And also the fear that you might do a better job than I do. I mean, fear of I'm going to get overthrown by somebody that's going to do a job better than I do and move up ranks, quicker. Fear in the workplace is a very interesting concept. And another great quality I find in the leaders that I've really respected were in some way, they inspired me to work better. And sometimes it was longer hours, sometimes, but to me, it was just, I was inspired to do that because the rewards were there and the camaraderie was there. And because I feel like they were working as hard, or if not harder. And it's being inspired by people like that is important in those roles.
Right. Nobody wants to be inspired by a leader who's walking around, I'm so exhausted.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody wants that job, right?
That's so
How
true.
can you be a leader and expect to motivate your team if you're walking around, I'm so exhausted, I'm so overwhelmed? Just doesn't work.
Do you feel like for a leader, like being able, the motivation side of it, is that, I like getting people to buy into your vision, to me is like, that's where you see the difference. When you get people to really buy into the vision and want to be part of that vision. And that to me is like probably an emotional IQ that's, or some kind of EQ that they have that can get people to get behind the vision,
Yes.
and I always wonder about that. How that that works. And if that's something, again, is it something that you're born with or something that you learn? Because emotional EQ is a whole other thing. And also, I have a question for you, like in your leadership, like strategies, when you work with clients, do you ever have like this desire to ask them like what position they were born in? Are they the oldest? Are they the middle? Are they the
Oh, I always
youngest?
ask.
Yeah. And do you ever find there's a correlation with leadership and where you where you were born in the family? Like what
It's
number?
interesting. It's really interesting that you said that, because I do ask people, oh, do you have siblings? Because I am curious about that. I have found the second child actually has more leadership.
That's really interesting.
It's just like a little funny fact that I've, a little tracking stat that I've done, but that the second child, not all firstborns are the leaders. And I think that that's a little bit of a belief that people have, like, oh, the firstborn, they're the ones that are, but that's not necessarily the truth. And yet I also know the youngest, I have a client of mine, she's the youngest of 5 and she's the most successful. So it's the nature versus the nurture, whatever that might be. But I have always found that the second,
they usually, by the time, like when the second comes along, it's a different kind. It's not they're not like the prince or the prince, the firstborn and the first this, and they have to actually put more output to be heard sometimes and to be noticed, because they're in the middle or the second. My son, my middle son, okay, when he used to introduce himself, he used to say, "Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm in the middle. I'm the middle." And I used to be like, "Why do you keep saying that?" He goes, "Because I am." But meanwhile, he was my go-to kid. He was the most operational and he was my go-to. He was like, I could rely on him for everything. And it was very interesting because he just, looked at everything around him and said, okay, like this is what I do and this is what I do well, and I'm going to work at it. And he was always very determined to in whatever path he took, he always found that way. And I didn't have to stay on top of him. My oldest, I had to stay on top of, and be more involved with. It's interesting. Very interesting.
One of the things that you said about leadership and the vision, and I think that getting people in the boat, no matter what your age, as my young self, I always thought myself as a leader, and I would find like little baby birds that fell out of their nest, and I would be finding the kids in the neighborhood to come help rescue the baby bird or the baby bunny or something like that. It is about the vision. It is about getting the clarity of your vision first, though. So I do a mastermind series and we go deep into the vision, because without that, you can't get team in your boat. You can't get friends in your boat. You can't get your spouse or your significant other, whoever it is, if you don't have clarity of that vision and what that vision stands for you, but also having it that vision, that person can see themselves inside of the vision.
Right.
So when I work with teams,
what about the vision and how other people are encompassed in that vision? Or do you find that it's helpful when, like I have this vision for my company and this is what I foresee, but this is how I see you're all going to be a part of it. Does that help with that as well?
100%. If you can't speak about your vision to your team or to whomever without getting them in your boat, this is doing a sales pitch, this is doing anything. You have to be able to communicate that in a way that people can see what's in it for me. Right. So you have a vision and you want to grow that vision. You have to share it in a way that what's in it for me, that I'm a hell yeah, I'm in.
I love that. I love the hell yeah, I'm in. Because when you say that, that's the win-win. That's the win-win. And when that communication from management, at least, and I'm talking about in a business setting, when it comes down really clearly, what the vision is, what the goals are, what the strategy is, and it it's basically to create a win-win situation, and the people who are, who are the worker bees understand that, and they want to try harder for the people because they're inspired. Isn't that like the bridge of what will create a well, run company?
Absolutely. But here's the other thing about the vision. The vision has to be revisited, right? So we have to have a timeline. So if it's a 12-month, 90-day, it could be 5 years, doesn't matter. That's really unimportant. But what's really important is that we have a timeline, a by when date. We want to create this. We want to reach this. And we're going to do it through and by and with, like we're adding that kind of language and navigating it so that we can cut down on the chaos and the confusion and have more clarity. And then we're going to check in. How are we doing?
Right. Measure.
Are we on our way?
Mm-hmm. That check-in, and like, what could we do to be better if it wasn't exactly the way we had slated it to be, and we need to tweak it, that could be revisited. Sure.
Yeah. You always want to check in with your vision, and because once your vision happens, you create a new vision. It has a shelf life.
Mm-hmm.
But then we check in with the mission part. So the mission is more of like the bold promise.
Right. The mission, your core values.
Yes.
Your vision is this. And then over time, as you change and you add things, you add to it and grow to it, but that stays consistent, what your mission is. And yeah. And I think you have to, today as a leader, it's very important that your ethics and your values are, you're transparent, because it's important. People want to know, like, what it used to be like, oh, okay, I have a product, especially in business, you get this is the product. But now customers, the audience, they want to know who's behind that. What do you stand for? Who are you? What do you mean? What do you mean by what you say? Do you stand behind this? There's more activism going on from like the corporate world and leaders, where they're getting more involved in that game. And I think ethics play a really big role. And you can tell, like, when somebody's just not walking the walk, you know what I'm saying? And not talking the talk.
Yes, Tammy, because what you're saying is that the consistency, because so often I feel people and leaders will say things, but their actions are not congruent. So if there's incongruency where your words don't match your actions, then people will lose faith in that type of a leader too.
Right. They won't believe in it.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying, the core values, Tammy. The core values, that we have behaviors that go with those core values.
Exactly.
So if the behavior of a core value of like teamwork, we'll just use that, and the behavior is there, but yet what you were saying, Caryn, as far as they're incongruent with that, within that core value, we actually, as a leader, this comes down to the communication. We actually have to be able to have a conversation relating to the core value and the behavior that's missing. And
try
really
to get it more aligned.
Yeah.
And revisit.
And let's face it, guys, we're humans. We're never going to be 100% in congruency with our core values. We go in and out of them all the time. But it's looking at like how to get back into that core value. And so that goes back to the leadership and the vision and the communication and the vulnerability. That vulnerability of like being able to say, hey, as a leader, I dropped the ball. And then being able
to be accountable as a leader, that you're accountable. Yes. And you're aware, you're self-aware and accountable, which we have to be. Listen, whether you're a leader or not in life, you need to have some kind of accountability and self-awareness, but it's even more important when you're a leader, I think, because you have to be accountable. First of all, you're responsible for the output of your team.
Yes.
At the end of the day, you're not going to go to the person above you or something and say, well, it's not my fault because, he didn't do his job. It doesn't work like that. So you have to be accountable in every which direction. And I also find like the leaders who are really successful inspire a great deal of loyalty, because their teams know that they're going to do the right thing. they're not there to protect favorites. They're not there to do certain things. They're there to do the right thing. And I think loyalty goes a long way, with trust and loyalty go even further than maybe the natural charisma and that kind of stuff, because this is like long-term things that people see come out, the real you. And so I think that the leaders, I know there's a whole bunch of probably matrix that go into looking at a leader, but I would hope that loyalty and trust, inspiration, and that is at the top versus lower, not just like performance, based leaders are based on performance,
You would like
I would
to
hope.
think that. And I just have a quick question, Meg. And do you find that there's a gender play that comes into effect when it comes to vulnerability?
Oh, good question, Caryn. Oh my gosh. I was just talking about this last night. Yes. Men in business, particularly, I believe, it's my experience and it's my belief that there is a level of, I can't show my vulnerability. I can't show my emotion. I'm supposed to be a man. I'm not supposed to cry. I'm not supposed to show weakness. And if I do this, I'm weak. But I know leaders, male leaders, who are amazingly empathetic people. So it's not always about that vulnerability and stuff like that. There's the empathy piece of being able to understand people and where they're at. And having that empathy. And I think that's a very hard muscle for a lot of men to build. I think things have changed from the time like my father, your fathers were.
I agree. I think
things have changed tremendously. And there's a lot of men's support networks out there to help them be like, okay, we can do this. And it's okay. You can shed a tear. You can be vulnerable in front of us, and we're not going to make any kind of a judgment. But I think that there's the cape that they wear, the men wear, is that cape of iron. I am strong. I am courage. I am the pillar that's going to hold everything together. But in reality, again, we can't do this thing called life by ourselves. We can't do business by ourselves. We can't really lead people by ourselves. Leaders always have support around them. And they have people who are in alignment with their vision, their mission, and their core values, and are in alignment with the purpose.
Have you seen your leadership coaching style change over the years, or have you noticed in general that how leaders were coached in the past and how they're coached now, there's an arc?
Very different.
Change?
Yeah.
It's very different.
It's very different, because what you had mentioned earlier, Tammy, is about the bottom line. It's all about the bottom line, those bean counters, right? It's all about the bean counters. There's still a piece of business that has to operate from that. Let's not, we've got to be fair and honest about that. Business has to do measures of success based upon financial growth and other measures of growth, retention and whatever it may be. So that all has to come. But I think that the leadership style is more about that empathy side, the vulnerability side, the piece of, I need to know what's happening on your life so I can support you. Like, what's happening, what's missing, and what's next, so that they can create the shift and really get team or others to be back on track and to create the financial measures or whatever they're measuring. So
right, because people bring their life to work. It's not like you just come to work and you turn everything off. There's people who come in, we were talking about this before, they wear a mask, and there's a mask on, and you don't even know who the real them is, but it does affect everything that they do and they say. Getting back to Caryn's point, like, do you see today, when it comes to leadership, like extreme gender differences between women leaders and male leaders, and how they're perceived in the workplace by teams?
Yes, I still think that there's a gender differential of women relating to male leaders and women relating to female leaders and men relating to female leaders. There's also, guess what? There's also the age. Consider that too. I've worked with people who are younger than their teams.
Right.
So there's the gender difference, and then there's the age difference that they're battling. Women feel, pardon?
So sometimes you're dealing with women who are basically managing and leading older people. Interesting.
And men. And the men might like, oh, I have to listen to her, or
Right.
whatever it is taking orders. So, but that goes back to the company culture and really understanding the value that everybody brings to the table so that we can support them in where their growth path needs to go and support them in creating and keeping the culture. Like, if we don't have that culture in place, then you can have all the strategies you want, but culture will eat strategy for lunch.
Exactly. Like if you don't have backing of the senior, like the rest of the, like you can't make a difference.
Right.
Yeah, that's very true.
And it's so true, because in a culture that would be supportive, and I'm forgetting the movie with Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro, but where he was a senior.
Oh, he's the intern. He was her intern.
The intern. Yeah.
And when the culture supports learning for the sake of learning, being good at, regardless of your gender, your age, you're good at this because you're good at it and you enjoy it and you bring something to the table. When you can establish a workplace like that, that's pretty special.
Very special. But that's the win-win that we're talking about, right? It's the win-win for everybody around, that we have a rainbow of people who work with us. I believe in rainbows. I love rainbows. I want a rainbow of people around me. I want age. I want ethnicity. I want everything that people can bring. I want to learn from them. And that's the other side of that leader that creates that relationship with their team, is they actually want to learn from their team as well.
Well, you know what? I've come across leaders who think they know everything. And my attitude is the day you think you know everything is the day you are irrelevant, because your head is just not in the right place. And it's so important to keep that open mind and to be open to learning, because there's always young people come in and I'm like, what are you doing? Because I don't even know what that is, but it's exciting. And I'm like, can you like explain it to me? Because what are you doing? And it's great. I mean, I think and just the same way also that young people can learn a lot from the experience of older people in the workplace. There's so much that can go back and forth, and mentor roles are really important at work, and to have those go-to people who can answer questions, but counsel and sponsor and, move you forward and do different things. It's really important. But I think at the end of the day, it's up to each person to also not rely on the leader to tap into them, but to do the best and bring it forward and to become that leader. Because the best line I heard is, great leaders create great leaders.
Absolutely. Yes, it is a perfect line. And that is the whole movement of a company, is to create leaders inside and always looking for more leaders. More leaders we have, but leaders that are guided, leaders that have those support measures, the more leaders that we have, the more success.
Well, Meg, this has been a fascinating conversation about leadership and the win-win, because like I said, it's an important topic. Everybody can be their own leader too, it's important. And I want to let the audience know the best way to reach you. How can they reach you?
The best way to reach me is actually through my website at megkingconsulting.com. They can schedule an appointment on my calendar. They can reach out to me through there. There's also, I have some great freebie little gifts for them. Perfect. I love it, creating the vision statement. And they're deep core check-in.
I like both of those.
Yeah, so that's the best way to reach me.
Perfect. So our listeners will go to your website and get those amazing downloads, and you have a contact form I'm sure they'll want to fill out on the website. So it's perfect. Meg King, 5-star queen, do me a favor, please come back on our podcast again because I love speaking with you. Caryn, she's nodding her head also. And we want to thank you so much for taking the time from your busy day and your travels and your upcoming daughter's wedding. Congratulations to be with us here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really, truly appreciated being on.
Meg, this was a pleasure, and just you are a wealth of knowledge, and we got so many great nuggets from you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Caryn. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. We would love your support, so please leave us a review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you are interested in hearing more of the Beyond the Table podcast, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Check out the show notes to find out how to reach us, and remember, you are strong, intelligent, and sensational. You are beyond the table.